So, welcome after what's been quite an intense week, right? I thought, because I'm sure we've all come from different places, uh, let's maybe arrive together and wherever you may be, you may be driving, to just do a 1 or 2 word check-in. There's no right, there's no wrong. Just give some thought as to maybe one word to describe how you feel physically. You could be feeling, I don't know, tired, hungry, thirsty, cold. And maybe one word that's more around your emotional state or your mental state. And then, yeah, if you're happy to share, I'll start. I'm feeling grounded despite quite stuck in my head, especially with all the news. And I'm feeling less anxious than I was yesterday after I really allowed myself to get wrapped up in the news after having a bit of self-isolation from the media. Kat, would you like to do a 1 or 2 word check-in?
Sure. So I am feeling, I think that's 4 words, ready for the weekend. Yeah, that's 4 words. So, yeah, long week. I've had 2 group days, so that's mentally quite draining. But I'm also feeling, from an emotional point of view, pretty satisfied, because I really feel like we helped a good deal of people become more grounded this week. So yeah, on that basis, good. A good end to the week, although ready for the weekend.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I know what you mean. And Kat, for those, and I know not everybody knows each other, but I know that you're a phenomenal mentor and coach. So a lot of people are going to count on you to be almost a beacon of faith and light during this time. Yeah.
No pressure.
Anybody else keen to do a check-in and share where you're at?
Sure. This is Arabella. I feel quite flat and saturated.
Well, I'm hoping then that you won't be flat. You'll be somewhat, let me reach over because I do have a glass of fizz here.
I need bubbles.
A little bit more effervescent, like the bubbles. And, you know, these are champagne chats because they've been inspired through my family who are from Champagne. It's part of my culture. I always grew up with champagne at every single celebration, and even small things, you know, like weekly meals with my family. So I'm by no means saying we have to be drinking. In fact, we know that too much alcohol can actually suppress your immune system. But it is important to also remember to try and stay positive and to celebrate. So on that note, before I explain a bit of the science around why that's actually useful, is I know it's been an incredibly hard week. And does anybody have anything that they would like to celebrate about this week, or maybe express gratitude for? It doesn't have to be something major. In this moment, I want to express gratitude for the internet, because I think it's going to, without the internet, we wouldn't be able to create some kind of sense of community as things get potentially really difficult around socializing and the concept of social distancing. So I'm really grateful that we're able to do this and have technologies like Zoom. And I see my brother's online, Fabrice, with his mobile phone, and he's not familiar with Zoom, but somehow it's working, which is great. Does anybody else have anything that they're grateful for in this moment?
I'll go, Celynn. I'm grateful for the role that I hold, as you alluded to earlier, that I've been able to help a number of people this week, but not just me, but the power of the network that we run has managed to help each other. So there's a great support network out there that's working for our members in the Vistage community. And I think I'm grateful that I've been able to facilitate that this week and bring a little bit of clarity to a number of people who are feeling a bit of a dark tunnel, really. There's a lot of contrasting news out there, and it's hard to know what to do. So I think we've given some people some tangible actions that have given them a sense of control over an uncontrollable situation, which can help.
That's wonderful. And is there thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And I think more than ever, people like us, and I say like us because I also know, I know all of you on this call, and all of you play a role in being an anchor for others. And I think it's important for us to stay positive, because it's so easy to get caught up in the tide, right? Like yesterday, after not really immersing myself in the news for a while, I then, before I knew it, 2.5 hours had gone past, and I'd read every single article and watched videos, and I went completely into fight flight response. I was, my heart was racing, my shoulders, my jaw was tense, I was clenching, I lost my appetite, I couldn't focus the entire day. I was quite sad, actually. I mean, I was very tearful, and I realized at the end of the day that actually, if I stayed in that state, we know that when you experience a lot of negative emotions, your immune system is weakened, because the moment you go into the stress response, and I'm not going to go too much into the science, your body releases chemicals. One of them is adrenaline. The next chemical is probably then cortisol, which can increase a process called inflammation. And when we have constant cortisol in our systems, and that gets fueled by emotions and thoughts that are around fear and anxiety, which is exactly what's being perpetuated by a lot of the media, it can then suppress your immune system. And it definitely, I don't know about you, but it may, when I go into the stress response, like I lose my sense of humor, I lose perspective on big picture thinking. I want to generally withdraw. I found myself craving sugar. I had more wine than usual. It was just this whole cascade of things. And if this is really just the start, when we're talking about the coronavirus and the potential of, like, it's still got to peak, it's really key to think about how we can manage our state. And especially if you've got people counting on you. So don't underestimate like obvious, simple things like getting enough rest and sleep, being very clear on boundaries around social media. Like, yes, we can stay connected to the news, but we don't have to perhaps do what I did, is spend the first 2.5 hours of my day yesterday. So something that I'm going to do is not spend time on news first thing in the morning. I'd like to try and, for the upcoming weeks and months, if at all possible, manage my state in a calm way from the moment I wake up to as far into the morning as possible. And so that leads into, I'm going to share with you why I said that there was something in common with the coronavirus and champagne, and the clue was roses. Does anybody have an idea of what that could be? So I'm going to share with you a photograph that may help, but in order to do that, I need to have a picture available, and then I'm going to share it. There we go. So can you see the photograph that's on the screen?
Yes.
And do you see some roses?
Yes.
Okay. So the next photo is one that I took, which is another vineyard. So the long row of green are vines, so grapes growing. And can you see the roses in front of them? Any idea why they're planted there? Besides to look, I think they look quite beautiful, actually. They're planted there. Well, back in the day, they were planted when ox or horses were used to help the workers in the vines, in order to prevent the animals or the ox or the cart from turning too shortly and like cutting a corner and potentially damaging the vine. They would put roses there because, of course, then it would force them to go a little bit further out. And also the roses with the thorns would actually could potentially hurt the animal. So they had to do a complete turn, and that avoided damage to the vines. And so there's a lesson there in terms of cutting corners. And then the other point, before I come back to cutting corners, is roses are susceptible to mildew and aphids that can then be an indication that there could be an issue for the vine. So if the roses get a mildew or they get infected, it can then alert the winemaker, the vineyard manager, to actually, they need to now treat the vine. And if they ignore that, you can imagine then, if the mildew gets into the vine, it becomes much more systemic. It goes to the core, and then it can, like, the cost is tremendous because you can lose a lot of the harvest. So I have two questions for us to think about. The first question is, when it comes to your first line of defense, which is the first part of your immune system and your ability to stay resilient, so to stay strong physically, mentally, emotionally, could you be cutting corners? that may have been okay pre-corona. But now that we've got this heightened awareness around keeping our immune system strong, because the potential of getting sick, catching something like a mildew or an aphid, or in this case, a very potent virus, is so much stronger, are there areas in your life where maybe you've been cutting corners? I'll share one example that might help. I know, because I do this quite often, and I'm going to stop it, is I wake up in the morning and I have coffee. And then when I start feeling hungry, if I'm busy working and I'm quite engrossed in my work, I might have another coffee. And then I might even have a third coffee to almost push away the hunger. And then I get to midday or 1 o'clock, and then I have my lunch. And I know that that's cutting a corner, because if I'm hungry, I should be eating food. And why not have something that's rich in vitamin C, or that's got a lot of vegetables in it, or fiber, and all that stuff that we know that is good for our systems. So that's one way that I cut corners that I'm going to potentially not do, so that I can really give myself the nutrients that it needs. Maybe take a moment just to think, where could you be cutting corners that may be not serving you around your health and well-being? And if you'd like to share, then just you could raise your hand. Or else I'll just give us a little bit of time to think about that. Sometimes helps to reflect on your daily routine. What happens when you wake up, or as you go about your day, right through into could you be cutting corners around sleep? Maybe staying up and watching. Oh, bonjour, David. David was with me when I took this photograph, because the photograph is,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it was in Johannesdal, in Cape Town. That was when I went for a walk next to the accommodation we were staying in. We went to a great party. So actually, David, you've just joined us, and welcome. I was just asking around, while I was explaining the purpose of why roses are planted at the end of vineyards. And it's there for two reasons. In the past, it was to avoid the horses or the oxen from cutting the corner, so to speak, and potentially damaging the vine. And the second reason is to alert for any mildew or type of aphids or infection. And so the question I just posed is, where in your life could you be cutting corners? And then a second question. Hello, Phyllis, welcome. You're welcome, you're welcome. The second question is, just like the roses are almost a red flag, they're there to identify that something might be wrong before it becomes a really systemic issue with the vine. What are your red flags? So what is your first line of defense? What are your roses? So how do you know that potentially your immune system or your well-being is not as optimized as it is? And perhaps think around your well-being physically, and then also emotionally or mentally. Are there signs that you know could show that there could be something coming in that you need to pay attention to? Because if you don't, the cost can be, like it is for a vineyard, enormous if they lose a whole lot of the harvest.
I think for me, Celynn, it's Clinton here. Hi.
Hi, Clinton. Welcome.
Thank you. I got cut off earlier. I was driving. So I think for me, it's around probably more sleep time. I tend to get engrossed in being more productive late in the night than during the day, which is weird. And then some parts of the day I'll struggle to kind of keep focus and steadfast to the task sometimes, which is probably something that I need to really address and look at, because as you know, some of the stuff that I'm involved with, it's very physically and mentally challenging and onerous. But yeah, I think managing my sleep pattern is definitely one of the things that I need to do, and my daily tasks a bit better.
And is it something that you feel motivated to act on? Because sometimes we know that we should be doing something. It doesn't mean that it's easy to do.
I'm motivated, but I think sometimes where I take the shortcut is I probably get a my 15-minute power nap or half an hour power nap, sometimes in the late evening or not the standard time for sleeping, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of compensates and probably even help me to stay up later at night, which is probably not the best way to do it.
Yeah, but it's great that you have a strategy. I mean, we can't make any different decisions or choose to be different without awareness. So awareness is awareness and acceptance is the first step. And when it comes to managing our own state, especially if we want to maintain, like I mentioned at the start, how if you have negative thoughts or you get carried away by the anxiety and the panic and the fear around what's happening, if you come from a place like that, it's so much harder to make a good choice. And I think it's great that at least you're doing something like the power napping, and being aware is your first step to making better choices.
Yeah, and you know how it is when you're running your own business. You're aware of a lot of things, and you procrastinate and push aside the things that you really should be doing. So yeah, I tend to get probably half an hour or so power nap here and there, which
Yeah.
helps, but not probably the best way to do it to sustain the productivity and awake time, so to speak.
Yeah, and that is true because we know that it's absolute. There's an absolute link between the quality and the amount of sleep that you get and your whole overall health and well-being. So if that's the one thing I would advise people, especially at this time, is definitely to make sure that we get good rest. Because I know for myself, if I'm sleep deprived, it's so much harder to think big picture thinking and just stay positive, for sure. And I'd like to share, thank you, Arabella and Phyllis. I've received, you've shared that your warning signals are, well, Arabella said that one of her cutting corners is to not drink enough water. Yeah, and that's important. Staying hydrated it also helps actually your mucous membranes in your body to resist potential infection. And her warning signals are when simple tasks feel difficult and overwhelming, and she doesn't have the energy to get through the day. Yeah, those are very good warning signals. And somehow, for me, what's happening with coronavirus and the way that we're all being forced to spend more time at home, I think we will be spending more time, or we will certainly be spending more time with ourselves, which is an opportunity, I think, to go inward, to stay curious, to maybe actually instill some habits because we're not spending so much time, I don't know, commuting and socializing. So hopefully, Arabella, that could help you in terms of sustaining energy. And Phyllis has shared that one of her warning signals, oh, it's a similar one to me, being critical of others. Yeah, and more judgmental. I have that too when I lose a sense of patience. So, yeah, being able to notice when our mood, so our mental, emotional well-being, and certainly our physical state shifts, can really be a bit like those roses that alert us to actually something's going on here. And if we want to really keep our immune systems robust, then it's key to do that. And another thing is to also be able to, I mentioned starting my day off. I'm going to make an effort not to get pulled into the tide of either social media or the media in general, because I do believe that the media will reach me no matter what. And I want to at least have as much time in the morning to manage my state and to potentially, well, still keep ahead of my work, but to also plan for my well-being. Is there anybody else that'd like to share what you currently do in the morning to help you sustain good well-being, or something that you think you may be able to do? And maybe, Clinton, there's some inquiry here around you for sleep. I'm hoping if you do get to bed super late that you are maybe allowing yourself to rise a bit later, so you're potentially getting the rest that you need. But
It's quite interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
It's quite interesting because I work out regularly, and over the last probably month and a half, I've been actually doing some exercise before bedtime, and I get the most fantastic sleep before bedtime. And sometimes in the morning, I do maybe a 10-minute hit, which kind of really gets you pumped up for the day.
Yeah.
but it's kind of both ends, the before going to sleep and the waking up and prep and getting up buzzing for the rest of the day. And that definitely helps. And I tend to alternate those as well.
Yeah. And what's nice about HIIT, that high intensity interval training, is that it doesn't take time or a lot of space. And you don't
No,
need fancy equipment. You can literally use your body weight.
body weight,
Uh,
sure.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know, for instance, that there are many apps and YouTube channels that now, like personal trainers and yoga instructors and teachers who aren't able to run classes, are going to be doing a lot of online type classes where we could feel as if we're part of a community, even though maybe we are exercising in the comfort of our home or living room. Because I know that I think a lot of us are going to get cabin fever. Like, we're going to be working from home. And if you're potentially sitting all day, that can make you feel sluggish. And so being able to do some exercise, but without relying on, because I'm sure that the gyms are going to be really empty and people aren't going to really go out and do that, then using things like, a HIIT app or a YouTube channel. And there's quite a few that I use already, especially for when I travel. And Phyllis, thank you. She shared that you'll avoid screen time until you've done your TM, I'm assuming is transcendental meditation. I think if all of us started embedding some kind of mindfulness and meditation practice in the morning, it could definitely help with our own stress response and immunity, but perhaps even help the overall general well-being. I'm joining a group on Sunday evening that's doing global heart coherence. So there's an organization called HeartMath, where they've done research to show that when groups of people come together and they sit in a meditative, calm space and they feel a heightened emotion of joy or love or gratitude, that they can create healing to the people around them. So it's lovely that you do that, Phyllis. And you also exercise and you have a cold shower. Oh, you and I would get along just fine. I do the cold shower to get the same feeling as Clinton shared, to kind of get pumped up for the day. And you spend some time to either write or draw instead of going straight to your phone. I think that's absolutely great and key. And thank you. You've shared that there's a transcendental meditation session on Zoom every evening. Perhaps if you share the link with me, I'll make it available to those of us that were on this call. So we've got about 3 minutes before I'm going to wrap up on time, because that's something that I feel is important. And the last point, so we've looked at thinking about our internal state and our emotions and how it impacts our ability to stay resilient and keep our immune system strong. And one way to do that is to be conscious of where we could be cutting corners around our health and well-being that could maybe be okay when we were in like pre-corona status, but now that there's this heightened awareness around keeping strong and healthy, perhaps not. And then I also asked you to think about red flags. So what are signs around your physical well-being, emotional and mental, that could alert you to the fact that your system, your body was not as strong and optimized? And then you can, with that awareness, take some action. And then lastly, I want to end on this, a more, David's inspiring me. I'm going to use the word sensorial note. If you see the picture, the red roses, does it make you think of anything? Anybody think of an expression? Five, four, three, two, one. I'll share mine.
I thought it was inspired, or it was alluding to some flavored champagne, which are more rosé, like a rosé wine, but it's more
Oh,
champagne around that angle.
okay.
Valentine's Day is gone already, but I think I didn't really think that was it, but that
Okay.
was the thought that came to mind.
Well, I like the way you think, because that's lovely. What I wanted to share was the expression for me is to smell the roses. So the idea of remembering to be present and in the moment, and with the amount of trauma that the planet is going through and will still go through, it's the small things like stopping to smell the roses that, what are the small things that you can notice in your day, perhaps right now in this moment before we say goodbye? Is there a way that you could look around your space, maybe look at the screen and see something with a little bit more color? Maybe you could become aware of what you're feeling, how I've got this beautiful scarf around my neck, and just conscious of how my fingers feel on my face. Could you smell anything? could you take a deeper breath and just allow yourself to come into this moment more? So in order to smell the roses, to really live each moment, because as we're being reminded more and more that life is really short, and we don't know what tomorrow will bring, but we do have today, and we have this very moment. And as we go into times that are really tough, is to, yes, look after ourselves, but to try and as much as possible have some fun along the way, and remember to smile and smell the roses. And I don't think there's much to celebrate about Corona, but as I started off pointing out, the effervescence of champagne is to remember to stay grateful, because when we're in when we're in a state of gratitude, we know that the body produces very different chemicals. So unlike the cortisol and adrenaline, they get produced when we're anxious and stressed and in a state of fear, we produce things like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and it generally makes us feel good.
Welcome to the webinar. Please stand by.
So we're hearing a welcome note, but I'm going to say cheers as we've reached the half hour, and I want to celebrate all of you. Thank you for joining me. I'd love to know if you feel that this was worthwhile, if you feel that maybe creating opportunities to connect like this is worthwhile. I know that I went onto a webinar for half an hour last night, and it was very helpful for me. So send me a note or give me a thumbs up, and maybe next week Friday, instead of waiting a month till the next champagne chat, I'd be very happy to do another one next week Friday. And thanks, Arabella. And we can just take a moment to be grateful no matter what's going on, and to share ideas, and to help all of us just stay beacons of faith and light, because the world needs a lot more of us to remind everybody else to stop and smell the roses. Merci, David. Thank you to all of you. I'm going to stop the share, come back in, and I'm going to send you all lots of love. Got this from Fabienne. She does this all the time. Thank you. I hope you have a lovely weekend, whether or not you're starting it with a glass of bubbly. Santé. Bye.
Bye, Santé. Bye.